the South Auckland families, etc., that
really
in a hole.
I'm just thinking, Gary, though, I mean, good old scalping has been going on since humankind had the first ever concert with tickets. Do we really think this will work? Surely it is up to the buyer to exercise quote-unquote common sense.
It sure is, but I agree that this is not our highest priority. And I've worked a little bit around the Pacific Island community, and the number of times I've seen that people in that community quite genuinely trying to help their kids or whatever, and they are ripped raw by people who are effectively scalpers, and that's way more important than somebody getting ripped off over a concert.
Marie says, look, tell Gary you don't find out you are not on the legitimate website until after you pay. Then the Viagogo name appears. They are crooks. I want to sneak this in before we head off. The panel has just leapt through this afternoon. A former Maclean's College student is in a stoush with the school over the selling of second-hand uniforms online. Jason Fong reckons the uniforms are too expensive, and he wanted to give students a better deal after he struggled to afford them while he was at school. But the school isn't happy. Fong was able to get his hands on students' email addresses to promote the business. Fong says they even threatened him with deportation. Now, on the school's website, a new blazer costs $230. Cindy, under Jason Fong, it was a lot cheaper. $230, pretty expensive, isn't it?
Well, school uniforms are expensive, and, I applaud Jason Fong. And you know how he got his hands on the school email list?
How?
The school made a mistake. The school sent out an email which didn't, to everybody, which didn't have all the other addresses blind.
That's right, and he capitalised on it.
And he capitalised on that.
Yes.
But, so apparently some staff members threatened him with deportation. I mean, hello. School uniforms are way schools earn money, because usually the school uniform shop is, one of the exclusive suppliers, or there's, several shops that sell it, but they're the only ones that you can get it. I mean, I think, most people could save money through Jason, then he should absolutely be allowed.
What do you reckon, Gary? Is this shutting down on sort of student entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurialism?
I think that this is exactly what a free market is. I have to say, and good on him. And I think that the teacher who threatened deportation, they should print his name so people can see what a so-and-so he is.
Tosser.
I nearly said the wrong third. Tosser, that's the word I was looking for.
It's the way, apparently it's kind of the way he's done it, using email addresses that weren't his to use. That would be an issue, would it not?
They sent it to him.
No, he capitalised on a mistake, Cindy.
Oh, so what?
Well, how old is he? 18? He's been capitalised on a mistake, so they're going to... Why don't they cut his hands off?
Do your own marketing. Do your own marketing.
Shall we cut his hands off?
Don't use the schools.
Well, he is doing his own marketing.
Yes, I think he's showing great flair. He'll do well.
Yeah. Put him in the stocks outside the school.
Go Jason Fong. As an ex-Maclean student, that place is a wannabe private school trying to protect... I won't say what the rest of the text says, but it's been wonderful to have you both on. Cindy Mitchell, Gary Moore, thank you so much for being with us. I'm Wallace Chapman. I'll be back.
Thanks for having us, Wallace.
3:45. Bye.
Ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, a prominent New Zealander is accused of groping two men and then trying to shut a witness up. Allegations of wage theft with migrant workers out of pocket to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. Claims include the boss demanding the workers pay him. MPs are split over whether thousands of children should take the day off school next week to protest against climate change. And what future for the bumbling jihadi Mark Taylor? Will he be left to languish in Syria, or is it straight to jail if he returns home? Ahead of the Pike River re-entry, we speak to Harry Bell, a former mines rescuer, and Virgin Atlantic flight attendants don't have to wear makeup anymore.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leao DNA. The lawyer for a prominent businessman accused of groping two men says the complainants were trying to use him for his money. On the opening day of the man's trial in the Auckland District Court today, the Crown told the jury the defendant abused his power to indecently assault the two men. But defence lawyer David Jones says it was the complainants who took advantage of his client, not the other way round.
People who are successful are often targets. They are people who get preyed upon by those who want something, who want money, who want some sort of influence, who want to get ahead with the assistance or with the help of the person who has the influence or power.
This morning, Judge Russell Collins refused the defendant's application for name suppression, but it continues for now as the defence plans to appeal against the ruling. Thousands of people charged unfair fees by two finance companies are to be recompensed. The motor vehicle lender Auto Finance Direct has agreed to return $460,000 to more than 5,000 people charged unreasonable fees. And Pacific Loans has agreed to refund $130,000 to 82 people charged interest and fees it had no right to charge. A Commerce Commission spokesperson, Anna Rawlings, says it has been monitoring credit fees to ensure they cover costs that are closely related to the particular loan transaction. Both companies were found to be in breach of consumer credit law. The Prime Minister has ruled out changing the MMP threshold before the next election. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, said earlier today that the governing parties are in discussion about the best way of reducing the threshold from 5% to 4%. He says he's sympathetic to the idea of putting it to a public vote. Jacinda Ardern says nothing will happen before the next election.
For 2020, no. It's clear what the position of the different parties are, but anything that we may do in this space, no, would not happen for the 2020 election.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. The Foreign Minister believes Mark Taylor forfeited his rights as a New Zealander when he joined Islamic State and burned his passport. Winston Peters told reporters today he doesn't want to waste too much time on the topic of Mr Taylor, who has been captured by Kurdish forces in Syria. New Zealand is now grappling with the question other countries are facing: what to do with terrorist fighters captured in war zones who then want to return home. Mr Peters doesn't have too much sympathy for Mr Taylor.
He forfeited any right, in my view, that he had when he joined a terrorist organisation. That was a serious challenge to all the human rights and legal rights of this country and other countries as well. And so, frankly, there's thousands and thousands of other issues I'm more concerned to focus on than this bungling terrorist.
The Foreign Minister, Winston Peters. Organisers of next week's school strike for climate change action have dismissed suggestions the event should not be on a school day. National MPs say the protest should be on a weekend, while Labour and Green MPs are being careful not to encourage students to wag school for the strike. But one of the organisers, Sophie Handford, says disruption is the point of the exercise.
We're sick and tired of not being listened to, and it's come to the point where we actually almost have to disrupt some of the norm to actually have our voices heard. And it shouldn't come to this, but I think we're ready to stand up and fight for that.
Sophie Handford says thousands of young people are likely to strike on March the 15th. Building and construction firms fear proposed changes to apprentice training will cause turmoil in their industry. The government wants to combine the country's 16 polytechnics into a single national institute and have a single provider organising apprentices into work-based industry training. The industry called an urgent meeting in Auckland today to discuss the impact of the new proposal. Martin Golden, who owns a building company, says a solid apprenticeship program is vital.
If changes aren't well considered and introduced, perhaps without the blessing of the employers, that the brakes get put on the industry. We're not at a time where we can have huge change and turmoil in our industry.
Martin Golden. Consultation on the government's proposal closes later this month. Hundreds of family members and friends of a missing man have taken to the streets of South Auckland to look for him. 43-year-old Denver Chance was last seen on CCTV footage leaving the southern motorway near Drury in his red Nissan Skyline 9 days ago. A family member and friend, Herbert Fowles, is putting up his drone. He says it's one of 5 searching from the skies.
I got asked by his cousin directly if I could come around these areas, just get aerial footage, see if there's anything gone off the road or, just any sort of signs that we could find at all.
Herbert Fowles says people are following routes Mr Chance might have taken. People who saw the car in Drury, Karaka and Bombay areas on the afternoon of Sunday, February the 24th, are urged to contact police. It's 5:05. The head of New Zealand Rugby League says recognising the increasing contribution of the Pacific Islands to the international game was a key reason for creating the Oceania Cup. Tonga, Samoa, Fiji and Papua New Guinea will join New Zealand and Australia in the competition, which kicks off in June. Tonga and Papua New Guinea are also set to face the British Lions, who will play 2 tests against the Kiwis. Greg Peters says having more Kiwis matches on home soil is great, but not the only driver behind the new competition.
A big part of this is obviously embracing and respecting the contribution of Pacific Islands players to rugby league in New Zealand, not only in New Zealand but around other countries as well, but particularly in our game in New Zealand, a high proportion of Pacific Islanders that play in our game. This gives them an opportunity to showcase and play for their countries as well in their second home, which is New Zealand.
Greg Peters, New Zealand Rugby League's chief executive. The rowing great Mahi Drysdale has suffered another loss to rival Robbie Manson at a single sculls trial on Lake Karapiro. The win should confirm Manson in the seat of this year's World Cup and World Championships. Drysdale also lost out to Manson at the National Champs single sculls final last month, where he was nearly 3 seconds off the pace. The result means Drysdale, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, won't get to compete in the single sculls, but he could be considered for crew boats. That could mean a return to the squad in which he raced last season. That's the news.
The Kiwi jihadi is caught.
He's always been a weird little dude, so find something else for him to believe in and he'll be as good as gold.
Kiwi kids trim the fat.
And we're the first country in the world that has shown a fall in the prevalence of obesity in children of this age.
And young Northlanders swap pine for manuka.
Mahi rangatira, which means that they'll have added motivation when getting up each morning and thinking about where they're going in the longer term.
Get up and go on Morning Report each weekday from 6 through to 9.
Then on 9 to noon, Professor of Preventative Medicine and former WHO advisor Sir David Skegg says the public health system is failing. And after 10, Whiramako Black and Hinewehe Mohe share their aroha of music and te reo Māori. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine apart from areas of cloud or possible fog morning and night. Waitomo to Wellington, including the Central High Country. Mainly fine but cloudy areas, especially morning and evening. And isolated light showers tomorrow. Gisborne through to Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon. Bulla and Westland, mostly cloudy with patchy light rain or drizzle. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, however a few showers about Stewart Island today and isolated showers tomorrow. Fiordland, rain. Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods. It's 5:08 and you're with RNZ National.
And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A prominent New Zealander has been accused of groping 2 men and then trying to bribe one of them to snuff out a police complaint. The man, who has interim name suppression, has gone on trial in the Auckland District Court with 2 associates, accused of trying to silence the alleged victim on his behalf. Today, both the Crown and Defence laid out their cases. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, was there, and just a warning, her report contains sexually explicit references.
This case is about a rich and influential businessman who has used his powerful position to take advantage of others.
Crown prosecutor Simon Foote opened the Crown's case this morning by telling the jury the accused had used and abused his power. The high-profile businessman is accused of indecently assaulting one man in 2008 and another man 8 years later in 2016. Mr. Foote told the jury the first complainant had been dining with the accused when he began to feel dizzy.
Squeezed on the bottom and said, "You have such a sweet ass." Then proceeded to kiss the back of his neck.
Mr. Foote said the complainant did not invite the sexual advance and was surprised he felt ill because he hadn't drunk much alcohol.
When he got home, he vomited and he was very ill. That night, and more the next morning, he told his partner about what had done to him.
Mr Foot alleged the second complainant was indecently assaulted in October 2016. He said this man was staying with the accused at the time when he came into his room wearing only his underwear and got into his bed. The prosecutor said the complainant, who felt ill and weak from food poisoning, told the man he just wanted to sleep.
Replied along the lines, "I want to hold you, I want to embrace you." Positioned himself on the king single bed, I think it was, holding firmly from behind.
Mr Foot said the man tried to wriggle away, but the accused protested.
Would say things along the lines of, "Calm down, let me embrace my love." He then reached inside his shorts and began masturbating his penis.
The Crown's case goes further than accusing the prominent New Zealander of sexual assault. His co-defendants are accused of trying to silence the second complainant with large cheques and offers of future work opportunities on his behalf. The accused has strenuously denied the allegations. This afternoon, his defence lawyer, David Jones QC, said it was the complainants who were taking advantage of his client, not the other way around.
You will be aware that people who are successful are often targets. They are people who get preyed upon by those who want something, who want money, who want some sort of influence, who want to get ahead with the assistance or with the help of the person who has the influence or power.
He said the Crown was trying to paint the man's success in a dark and sinister light when he had done nothing wrong. Lawyers for the man's co-defendants also told the jury their clients were innocent. Judge Russell Collins refused the high-profile New Zealander's application for name suppression this morning, but it continues on an interim basis after his lawyer, Mr Jones, indicated he would appeal the decision to the High Court. In Auckland for Checkpoint, this is Arnica Smith.
Police have launched a homicide investigation following the death of a 70-year-old woman at a retirement village north of Wellington. They say they're speaking to one person in relation to the incident and are not looking for anyone else. The police were called to the property on Westgate Drive in Raumati Beach just after 9:30 this morning. A scene examination is currently underway and cordons are in place. We'll bring you developments on that story throughout the show. Allegations tonight of wage theft, with workers out of pocket to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. The Migrant Workers Association says at least 3 workers at Botolo franchises operated by Ravinda Aurora in Auckland and the South Island have been paid substantially below the minimum wage for up to 4 years. And in some cases, it's claimed that Mr Aurora demanded the workers pay him cash. In one case, it's alleged a worker put in 84 hours in a week but was only paid for 32, meaning their actual pay was $7 an hour, half the legal minimum wage at the time. In another example, it's claimed that Ravinda Aurora paid workers correctly and according to their pay slips, but would then demand the employees refund him thousands of dollars in cash, again leaving their pay packet light. At the time, the migrant workers' visas tied them specifically to Mr Aurora's businesses. The Labour Inspectorate has confirmed to Checkpoint that it is, quote, currently progressing proactive investigations into Mr Aurora's nickel Himalaya companies. Meanwhile, Anu Kalotti of the Migrant Workers Association says the employees that she's working with felt vulnerable and were scared to speak out.
It's because their visas are attached to this employer, so that is the threat that is used against them, that if you do not pay up, or if you do not do the extra hours, or if you do not work without any rest breaks or meal breaks, we will inform immigration and get your visa cancelled, and next thing you know, you'll be deported. So that's the commonplace scenario and the situation in this case as well. And then, most migrant workers who come here, they have a dream of being able to settle here permanently, and that dream isn't just something they've dreamt up on their own. It is sold to them through a lot of the government websites, through the Immigration New Zealand website. So that is their ultimate goal, to get that residence. So they are relying on the employers to achieve that goal. So that's what is in their forefront of their mind, that they'll do anything to not compromise their dreams, so that they'll put up with anything, any form of exploitation to make sure that they don't jeopardize their chances of getting that next work visa or getting permanent residence.
So, Anu, the 3 workers that you are helping at the moment, were all of their visas tied to this particular business? They had to work for this business?
Yes, that's correct.
Because the other thing I noticed is that one of the workers, during the time that he was with this business, he got his essential skills work visa. So in order to get that, he needed to make a certain amount of money, didn't he?
Yes,
he needed to reach
right, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So the question is, well, was he complicit in this alleged rort? Because he obviously wanted on paper his pay to read a certain amount in order to get his visa. So arguably he's gone along with it to obtain a visa which he wouldn't really be entitled to if he was honest about the hours and the money he was getting.
Right. So these workers, they don't just want that amount of salary on paper. You know, we would want them to be paid that amount of salary in real practice as well. Yes, it could be argued that the workers are complicit, but then the employment law does make a provision that, you know, that you have to look at the balance of power here. The employers hold all power in this relationship, so the workers are the most vulnerable in this situation and have very little power. So that's why they end up in these situations that are really unfortunate and shouldn't really be happening.
How much money do you think these workers are owed?
It's 3 workers worked there for different periods of time. So each one of them has a slightly different claim in terms of dollars, but we're looking at least tens of thousands of dollars put together between these 3 workers. So yeah, we have been doing calculations. So we have sent all of our figures to the employer. So unfortunately, it's just not been reciprocated, or we've not had any engagement from the other side.
What evidence do you have, Anu, besides these workers' testimony, their word? Do you have any hard evidence?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have cases where fellow workers who worked alongside are witnesses that these workers did actually work those hours. For example, the same worker is opening the shop and then closing the shop at the end of the day. And these are liquor stores we're talking about, which easily open 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours a day. So we've got colleagues who are witnesses. And then we've also got audio recordings where a conversation between one of the workers and the employer about the hourly rate and how the employer is not able to afford the pay rate that their visa demands, so they're asking for amounts back, and they're also referring to X $1,000 that have already been returned by the worker, and then this is how much you owe me, and this is how much more you need to give me by a certain date. So we've got evidences of that form.
So you've got that in recorded form? Someone has recorded these conversations?
Yes, that's right.
So how has Mr Aurora responded to your request for mediation and to settle these wage claims?
Initially, when he was approached, he settled to pay just 1 year's worth of annual leave. Although all 3 workers have worked more than 1 year. One of them's been with him 3+ years. So that was the only settlement they've had. And then further to that, we approached for next session of talks and mediation directly. We were told that these workers are not owed anymore. So then we took the next logical step of going through the Labour Inspectorate mediation services and put a request in, and we did not get any response at all.
From Mr Aurora? So Mr Aurora has not responded at all to your request for mediation through the Labour Inspectorate?
Yes, that's correct. So it wasn't just our direct request, it was a request from Mediation Services at MB that Mr Aurora has ignored.
Now, RNZ has made repeated attempts to contact Ravinda Aurora. He hung up on our producer after telling her to contact his lawyer, but refused to provide details of who that is. We have left several messages requesting those details. I went to visit 2 of his Auckland businesses today. Staff said he was not on site, but 2 employees told me they were paid fairly and above the minimum wage. Hi there, my name's Lisa Owen. I'm from Radio New Zealand. Is Ravi here? Okay. Are you expecting him back today? No. You're not? Are you a student or?
I am the manager.
Oh, you're the manager of the store. Have you had any problems with him paying you? Is he paying you the minimum wage?
All good.
Yeah?
I'm getting all right payment.
You are?
Yeah.
Are you working long hours, or how many hours do you work a week?
35.
Do you just work 35 hours?
Yeah.
Sure about that?
Yeah, I have everything, the proofs, my timesheets, everything. I work 35 hours as a manager.
As a manager, and he pays you manager's rates? Has he ever asked you to give him cash back?
No, I don't think so anybody's in touch doing that.
Yeah, but he's never asked you?
No.
Do you know if he's asked any of the other workers for cash back?
No.
Is Ravinda here?
No.
Whereabouts is he?
Don't know.
I'm just wondering, are you paid the minimum wage or?
Yeah, we're paying pretty well.
You pay, yeah, fair? He's never asked you to, has he ever asked you to give cash back from your wages to him?
Never, ever.
Never?
Never.
How long have you worked here for?
It's been more than 2.5 years.
Yeah. Does he pay you above the minimum wage?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Ever had any problems with him paying?
Sorry, I won't.
Because he's been in trouble before, hasn't he, for pay?
No comments on that, sorry.
Yeah? So the roller door coming down was the end of that conversation. In a previous investigation in July 2014, the Labour Inspectorate issued an enforceable undertaking to Ravinda Kumar Aurora in relation to 8 of his companies. That was for failings in employment agreements, record keeping and provision of holiday and leave entitlements. Now that resulted in him being ordered to pay $30,000 in arrears to his employees. It is 22 after 5. Really interested to know what you think about this, the problem of wage theft in the country. Have you participated in unpaid trials? Do workers ask you to work and not pay you? Are you being shortchanged in your pay packet? Do get in touch. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz, or you can Facebook us, Checkpoint at RNZ. You are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ and I'm Lisa Owen. It's now about 23 after 5. The detention in Syria of New Zealand jihadist Mark Taylor has highlighted a problem faced by many countries. What to do with terrorist fighters captured in war zones who then want to return home. Now, Mark Taylor fought for Islamic State but surrendered to Kurdish forces in December. The so-called bumbling jihadi who moved to Syria to join Islamic State in 2014 could face a lifetime in prison if he returns home. The government has been fielding questions about how it would deal with him if he did make it back to New Zealand and about the passport he used to travel to Syria. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Mark Taylor has been on authorities' radar for several years. In 2015, the US government declared him a global terrorist after he encouraged attacks in Australia and New Zealand and appeared in an IS propaganda video. And he was deported by Australia's National Security Agency in 2010 after being deemed a security risk. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was asked if the government made a mistake back in 2011 when it reissued his passport that he then used to travel to Syria.
I haven't had specific information around what happened with the issuing of his passport, but one point I think it is worth making is that he did not depart from New Zealand for Syria. He departed out of Indonesia to Syria.
Ms Ardern says the government is assuming Mark Taylor now has no passport after reports he'd burnt it, and his best option is to physically get to the nearest consulate in Turkey. If he does make it home, she says there are laws in place to protect other New Zealanders.
That does say that for those who engage engage in terrorist activities, that can be, depending on the case, anything from a maximum of 14 years to life imprisonment. There are, of course, penalties under the Crimes Act as well, and penalties relating to objectionable material.
Mark Taylor told the journalist who interviewed him in Syria that he'd been interviewed by intelligence agencies while he'd been detained in Syria. The government wouldn't confirm if this was the case, but the minister responsible for New Zealand's intelligence agencies says no one from the government has been in contact with him. But Andrew Little says New Zealand would not deny his citizenship.
We can't make him stateless, we can't withdraw his citizenship. But in order to get back here, he has to physically get to a consular post in order to get an emergency passport so he can get back here, and he has to find funds to get back here as well.
National's Todd McClay is urging the government to take the hardest line possible.
He's made a number of choices. I think he sounds like a very dangerous individual. Ultimately, if he applies for a passport, New Zealand has obligations there. Over and above that, I don't think he's somebody we want back in New Zealand.
New Zealand isn't alone grappling with the thorny problem of what to do with citizens who have gone off to fight with terrorist groups, with about 40 people having been prosecuted so far in Britain. However, as many as 400 people in the UK have been identified as being a security concern after returning from Syria and Iraq. The BBC's Frank Gardner says this situation is a failure in the broader war on terror.
It's been militarily very successful. It's taken 4 years to degrade and eventually destroy the caliphate. But not enough thought has been given to this, and they cannot languish forever in these camps because the Syrian Kurds will eventually want to let them go.
Frank Gardner says even with anti-terrorism legislation in place, governments can't be sure charges will stick if people do end up on trial in their home countries, when it's a case of one person's word against another.
And there might be strong intelligence that says person X was a brutal, cruel, sadistic torturer who beheaded lots of people, but there might not be any photographic evidence of it. So, in other words, that person, if brought to court in his own country, quite possibly could walk free.
The Foreign Minister Winston Peters told reporters in his view Mark Taylor forfeited his rights as a New Zealander when he joined a terrorist organisation like Islamic State.
That was a serious challenge to all the human rights and legal rights of this country and other countries as well. Frankly, there's thousands and thousands of other issues I'm more concerned to focus on than this bungling terrorist.
So if he did get back to New Zealand, do you think he should be allowed entry?
Well, first of all, you saw, if he had the right passport, him burning his passport.
So you think
there's consequences for doing that.
Even with his party taking a hard line on Mark Taylor, National Simon Bridges acknowledges New Zealand's responsibilities.
And we do have to, as I say, follow the law, the conventions around all of this. But does New Zealand want him back? No, we don't. He's made his bed, he's been over there.
Under the Terrorism Suppression Act, a person convicted of committing a terrorist act can be imprisoned for life. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Should female cabin crew be required to wear makeup while on duty? While Virgin Atlantic is ditching mandatory makeup in what's being described as a significant change. The airline's female cabin crew, whose uniform features a tight red skirt, will also now be offered trousers as part of their standard uniform instead of only on request. Many long-established airlines have strict rules on styling for female staff, but some have at times caused a backlash for being sexist. A promotional calendar by Thai airline Nok Air caused a furore for featuring female flight attendants in swimwear, while Pakistan's national airline caused similar fury by cracking down on supposedly overweight cabin crew earlier this year. Our reporter Logan Church, who does like to get glammed up himself, went to speak to passengers at Christchurch Airport, and most thought the move by Virgin was the right decision.
Yeah, I think it is actually. I mean, it is the image of air flights, like glamour and everything, but I think nowadays it's hard work for them, and to have to be made up perfectly all the time, it must be really difficult. So yeah, I mean, if they're happy to do that, then it's their choice, isn't it?
Do you think it's a sign of the times as well, a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. I suppose we're getting more relaxed about things and making people have a choice. It's much better. I suppose if you still want to be glammed up, then you can be, But if you don't, that's your choice, you know.
Are there any industries where you'd expect someone to be glammed up as a consumer?
Probably at the makeup counters, because they're showing off what the product is. But even then, sometimes it's a bit too much. When you're looking at them, you think, oh God, could I ever wear that much makeup? So, yeah, but again, I suppose if they had a choice to make it more natural, then that's great.
Personally, I don't think they should have to make makeup if you don't want to. If they don't want to, what do you think?
Yeah, I have no problem with the changes. I think people should feel comfortable in the job they're doing. And as long as I can recognize them as an employee of the airlines, pin or name badge or something, I'm totally fine with that.
So is that the sort of standard of dress you would expect from someone on airline, something that is recognisable, but not necessarily glammed up like you're about to go onto a Broadway stage?
Yes, exactly.
Everyone's personality is different, and I think they should be free to dress accordingly.
Are there any industries where you would expect someone to have to wear makeup like that?
Makeup?
Makeup?
No, because at first I was going to say a model, but then some men actually prefer the look without makeup.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean sexy.
I prefer no makeup on a woman, but that's my personal opinion.
It's everyone's own decision, like what to do. So why wouldn't you do the same thing on the airplanes? Like if it's a normal thing in real life, airlines are real life too, but you know. Nowadays it's more important what everyone else or the own decision of the person is, so there's no point of making those strict rules when everything else is so relaxed.
What sort of standard of dress would you expect from someone working on an airline?
I mean, it should be more official, sort of. You shouldn't wear sweatpants or something, but yeah, shouldn't be too strict. So if women want to wear trousers, they can wear trousers, and not you have to wear a skirt or something. So it should be official, but not too strict.
Now, our own airline, Air New Zealand, says its female cabin crew, ground staff and pilots are currently asked to wear natural-looking makeup when in uniform. However, a review is underway as part of its grooming policy and the uniform change that's coming up. Love to know what you think about this. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. I'm sure you've got some views on it. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, should kids be encouraged to ditch the classroom to rally against climate change? And a man who was part of the Strongman mine recovery effort on why he doesn't hold out much hope of finding the men who died at Pike, including his own nephew. First though, it's time for the headlines with Susanna. Me and Nona are off to get a makeup wipe.
The lawyer for a prominent businessman accused of groping two men says the complainants are trying to use him for his money. On the opening day of the trial in the Auckland District Court today, the Crown told the jury the defendant abused his power to indecently assault the two men. But defence lawyer David Jones says it was the complainants who took advantage of his client, telling the jury people who are successful are often targets for people who want money or to get ahead. Police have launched a homicide investigation following the death of a 70-year-old woman at a retirement village in Raumati Beach, north of Wellington. One person is being spoken to and police are not looking for anyone else. They were called to the property on Westgate Drive in Raumati Beach just after 9:30 this morning. A scene examination is underway. Thousands of people charged unfair fees by two finance companies are to be recompensed. The motor vehicle lender Auto Finance Direct has agreed to return $460,000 to more than 5,000 people. Pacific Loans has agreed to refund $130,000 to 82 people. The Commerce Commission says it has been monitoring credit fees to ensure they're being applied correctly. The Foreign Minister believes Mark Taylor forfeited his rights as a New Zealander when he joined Islamic State and burned his passport. Winston Peters told reporters today he doesn't want to waste too much time on the topic of Mr Taylor, who has been captured by Kurdish forces in Syria. New Zealand is now grappling with the question other countries are facing: what to do with terrorist fighters captured in war zones who then want to return home. The fire service is reminding people in Bay of Plenty and Tauranga of the total fire ban following the recent spate of hot weather. Firefighter Don Scott says with high temperatures, low humidity and dry fields, it's easy for fires to start. He says anyone wanting to mow their lawns should do so in the morning and ensure any sparks don't start a fire. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is
the interim chief executive for about 6 months. He took on the, what I want to say, hang on to the nettle, so to speak, really tough job. 6 months of nothing but bad news, wall to wall. And now he's taken on the job of the permanent position, chief executive, and he'll have that role for some time because he's got a lot of work to do to turn that cooperative around. It's been losing money. It's had a poor return on capital. It's looking to sell some of its big assets, and generally speaking, it's going to still be a tough time ahead for him.
And do we know much about his background?
Well, he's been with the company for a while. He was the liaison. He was working for part of the organization called Farm Source. So he is, part of the farming community, has a good relationship with the dairy farmers. There's a lot of issues outside of Fonterra's control that dairy farmers are dealing with that have to do with regulation, environmental issues, those sorts of things. So he thinks that he's got what it takes to make it work, and he was willing to take the job because, we understand that a few people passed up the offer on that job, and it paid a fairly good salary. His base pay is going to be close to $2 million a year, and he'll probably get some bonuses if he can turn things around, no doubt.
And the other story today, small shareholders not too impressed with the makeup of the Capital Markets Review Committee. What's their problem with it?
Well, the Capital Markets Review has been supported by the Financial Markets Authority and the NZX. It's a review that's looking at how to invigorate the capital markets, which have been rather sluggish over the last few years. They want to see a good plan going for the next 10 years. And they've brought together a group of members that represent various bodies that would have an interest, and that would be like the legal profession and those sorts, and people that work in the capital markets like brokers and that kind of folk. But John Hawkins of the Shareholders Association is a bit disappointed. He's saying, well, there's no representation on this board from direct retail investors. So those are people that, want to buy and sell shares. And these are their members, basically, as well as venture capital representatives. There's none of those folks. And that's a real gap in the market. That's one of the areas where New Zealand startups and so on are saying there's really a need for that, follow-on investment. We're not seeing that. The markets that the NZX looked after, which were, the main board and then the smaller markets, the smaller market boards failed and they're merging them together. So, there's a big gap there, and I think it's a fair comment that representation is there. Whether or not they can succeed in capturing their views and so on, well, that remains to be seen. We should know more in October when they file their report.
Speaking of the markets, highlights and lowlights today?
Well, Asian shares took a step back, and really considering there was a little bit of weakness there over these trade tensions and China marking down its economic growth outlook. Nevertheless, though, our market ended down just 13 points. That's not too much, to 9,400. And our dollar is steady at 67.9, 68 cents US, 96 Australian, and 51.6 pence.
Thank you, Nona. Lovely to have you in the studio. That's Nona Pelsier with your business news. MPs are split over whether thousands of children should take a day off school next week to protest against climate change. Green and Labour MPs will give the School Strike for Climate a warm welcome when it marches on Parliament next Friday. But National MPs say pupils shouldn't bunk class for it. Here's our political reporter, John Gerritsen.
The Green Party co-leader and Climate Change Minister James Shaw told TVNZ's Q&A programme last night that students should leave classes to protest climate change next week. But today he rode back on that and told Checkpoint he supports the strike, but he's not urging children to participate.
In choosing to take time out in order to do this, these students are placing something at risk. Right? That's actually the point of a strike. You're placing something at risk, and that is an individual choice that people have to take for themselves.
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says it's up to schools and parents to decide how to handle the strike.
I want kids to be learning. If taking part in this action is part of the learning process, then there may be some merit in it. If they're just taking a day off school, then actually they're punishing themselves rather than anybody else. And so, I hope that they will be thinking very carefully about that.
Other Labour ministers are more supportive. Housing Minister Phil Twyford says climate change is too big an issue for young people to ignore.
I think it's great to see young people getting involved in issues like climate change, because actually if there's one issue that's going to affect the next generation, it's climate change. So.
And Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor says he'd be happy for his children to go on the strike.
We have teacher-only days, so this will be a kids-only day. You know, these kids are smart. We are dealing with their future. You know, I think it's pretty organised. I have no problem with it.
You'd be happy with your daughters skipping school?
Absolutely.
On the other side of the House, the National Party is decidedly disapproving. The party's leader, Simon Bridges, says students have a right to protest, but not on a school day.
We know that there's a number of strike days coming up. Maybe they should protest on one of those days. I mean, I think the reality here is, yeah, it's a serious issue, but I certainly wouldn't want to say anything that encourages students to be taking time out of their schooling.
National's education spokesperson, Nikki Kay, says government ministers should not be encouraging students to participate.
I'm a bit concerned that you have got the Minister of Climate Change out there encouraging people to not be at school, and that does put parents and principals in a pretty difficult situation. The main thing is that parents have given permission. Otherwise, we may have unsupervised kids, 12 or 13 years old, in the streets.
National Party MP Judith Collins is dismissive of the strike.
Their little protest is not going to help the world one bit, nor will it help the education. But I also remember that when I was that age, I used to think a day off school was a good thing.
And former Environment Minister Nick Smith says the cause is good, but a strike is not the best option.
Young people getting engaged and involved in the issue of climate change, great thing. Disrupting schools for a day, look, I'm a Conservative. My view is that generally strikes cost us all as a community, and we can all find excuses to drop tools, not work, not get educated.
But strike organiser Sophie Handford says disruption is the point of the exercise.
We're sick and tired of not being listened to, and it's come to the point where we actually almost have to disrupt some of the norm to actually have our voices heard. And it shouldn't come to this, but I think we're ready to stand up and fight for that.
The young demonstrators argue the protest is needed because climate change affects their future the most. And that's a message they want to make loud and clear, whether the adults in Parliament like it or not. Atu I te whare paremata, mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen aho.
It's been more than 8 years since the Pike River mine disaster, which claimed the lives of 29 men. In just a few weeks, mine experts will attempt to re-enter the site to recover the bodies of those lost. For Harry Bell, a former mines rescue worker and chief mines inspector, the upcoming mission is a stark reminder of one of New Zealand's other mining tragedies. He was part of the recovery effort at the Strongman mine near Greymouth, which exploded in 1967, killing 19 men. All but 2 of those who died were recovered by Harry and his team. He told Conan Young and cameraman Dan Cook he doesn't hold out much hope of finding the men who died at Pike, including his own nephew. He made the same point to the victims' families when they asked him why it had been possible to recover the bodies at Strongman straight away, but not at Pike.
Strongman had 1 explosion, and if you'd have seen the mess of the bodies, Pike River's had 4. Think about it. I left that thought with them. And I'll tell you what, and because it's 9 years ago, we know about the massive big rockfall that they're all in behind, but the workings themselves are liable to be falling in.
43 years separate New Zealand's last 2 mining disasters, Strongman in 1967 and Pike River in 2010. Both were on the South Island's west coast, but for Harry Bell, who helped with the recovery effort at Strongman, the similarity ends there. He says a major difference is that at Strongman they were able to recover the men's bodies largely in fresh air because the above-ground ventilation fan was able to be restarted. At Pike, the fan was underground, the first time one had been placed in such a position, meaning there was no chance of restarting it to expel the noxious fumes inside. Harry Bell says sealing Pike River soon after the first explosion would have made a huge difference, but this didn't happen either.
Strongman, when we knew there was a fire there, we sealed it off and left it. Now that's what should have happened at Pike. I can imagine the families would have been ropeable if they'd have sealed that Pike River up, and that's what they should have done. If they'd have sealed it up, it meant that the fires that were still burning in there would have gone out, and after a month or 6 weeks the rescue teams could have gone in and they didn't have the danger of blowing up again, and they could have got the bodies, but they were stopped from doing that.
His memories of strongmen remain fresh. As a former employee, he knew all of the 19 men who died. Men whose bodies he was tasked with recovering to make sure their families were able to give them a decent funeral.
The area that we got the bodies from was where the explosion happened, and they were all very badly burnt, and knocked around, and yeah, pretty messy.
And at the time, what's going through your mind as you're having to do this?
It's always in your mind it can blow up again because it's happened, but you just get in, grit your teeth and do what you got to do, you know, yeah.
You've talked about the heat and...
Oh, it was very hot and humid, yeah. And a lot of the rescue guys got exhausted. I managed to hang on till 1 a.m. in the morning, but I was absolutely buggered too, yeah.
Is there a lot of smoke?
Oh yeah, it was murky. Yeah, it was murky in there, and some of the bodies were partly buried. You know, there's bits of roof had fallen down and that, and you know, and some of them we could see their light shining up. Their lamp was still going, and we'd go and pick them up. You know, and of course in those days we went by every person underground had a lamp number. And you knew by his number who, like Billy Jones was number 28 or something, so you knew who it was, because some of them you wouldn't have recognised them, you know. That's why the coffins were all sealed. None of the, apart from Laurie Coughlin and Ginty Newcomb, a lot of the relatives went crook about that. But I used to say to them, well, you know, remember them as you see them in the morning when they left, because you wouldn't want to see them.
Harry Bell had concerns about Pike River before the explosions in November 2010. His vast experience of working in underground coal mines, including a stint as the country's chief mines inspector, means he's often been called out of retirement to head underground once again. One such occasion was to help with drilling the 2.3 kilometre long entry tunnel at Pike, the same tunnel the recovery team is due to re-enter this month. Things went wrong soon after he'd left Pike.
And Peter Whittle decided to push the single entry right through the Hawea fault, a big major reverse fault, which is always a gas reservoir in a gassy mine. And they had nothing but trouble with ignitions, as we know. They had 10 gas ignitions in a week or a fortnight.
This is soon after you left?
Yeah, I'd left by then.
Yeah.
And
what was happening with those gas ignitions as they continued?
Oh, they're getting night and they go woof, and big blue flames, and all the men be ducking their heads, and it was terrible.
He says he feared the mine was another strongman disaster waiting to happen, and he passed on those concerns to then Health and Safety Inspector Kevin Pointer. But he says nothing was done to improve ventilation or properly address the methane ignitions. He's angry the same thing has been allowed to happen at Pike River. In his view, there was enough evidence presented at the Royal Commission to have managers held accountable.
If I'd had anything to do with it, I'd be pushing to get Whittle and company convicted and at least give the family some satisfaction. I mean, why did 6 managers all resign and leave over a short period, you know? It's not rocket science to know what's happened, what was going on there.
Former Mines Rescue Worker and Chief Mines Inspector Harry Bell talking to Conan Young there. It is about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're always keen for your feedback, so you can text us on 2101, do tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's been dubbed the ugly cloak alert, and now Checkpoint can reveal that it's not the first time New Zealand Golf has been criticised for using what it calls a kurawai. The cape that's been described by some as a couch rug was thrown over the shoulders of the New Zealand Golf Open winner at the Hills over the weekend. The problem is New Zealand Golf calls the garment a kurawai. Others do not. New Zealand Golf CEO Dean Murphy has declined to answer our questions about where the garment comes from and what it's made of. He's also declined to be interviewed. But it's not the first time that the cape New Zealand Golf calls a kurawai has attracted criticism. Ata Te Kanawa comes from a family of noted weavers. She says she alerted New Zealand Golf to the fact that the dodgy kurawai they were using in ceremonies a few years back was not the real thing.
I've lived with the laborious task of extracting the muka. I mean, it takes absolute months to do. Then you're dyeing the muka, then you're applying the feathers, and so that's in stark contrast to popping down to Spotlight, getting a 1.5 metres of faux fur, putting a satin backing on it, etc. So I really, and I know a lot of others with me, have issues with what we've called or termed ugly cloak alert. So it's not the first time. New Zealand Defence Force a few years ago, we had to go at them as well. So it's just kind of, it just doesn't sit well. And last night I had the opportunity to communicate with Sir Michael Hill about it, because I thought, gee, he's kind of in the mix by default.
Yep, because the Open happens at his golf course, yeah?
That's right. But he is a man that values taonga, and he certainly acknowledges that he values taonga Māori. He's an art collector, of course. And so when I asked, was he aware, he told me that he just assumed the winner of the New Zealand Golf Champs would adorn something of quality, as I'm sure we all would just assume that would be a matter of course. So,
what do you take that to mean, Ata? What do you take that to mean? That it wasn't quality that was bestowed upon this winner?
Definitely wasn't quality. Absolutely no arguments there. I mean, I don't think you even have to be a weaver to make that assertion. Just looking at it, you can actually see the satin backing. You can see that it's faux fur. So, I don't have any hesitation at all in saying...
So how long ago did you complain? Because I just want to establish how long New Zealand Golf may have known that people in the weaving community were not happy with the description of this as a korowai.
I think it may be 2 to 3 years ago, possibly longer. I'm fairly confident New Zealand Herald did a story on it as well, because I was called and asked, are these feathers genuine? Do you think these feathers are genuine? And if it's the same cloak, and I'm pretty confident it is, then I did write to them and just to let them know that, if they would believe that it was a cloak of quality and authenticity, then they needed to be corrected. It definitely isn't.
Yeah, so they've known for a while, they've been put on notice that the item that they were using was not up to scratch.
Oh, yeah, without doubt. They've been aware of it. But then, I've got to say, because this is all about raising the awareness and making people, and, the opportunity it gives us is that people start talking about what is authentic, what is quality, what isn't. So they don't know what they don't know. And if they were told, and we don't know this part, the backstory, if they were told that it was authentic, then they maybe just accepted it was.
So who's making these ugly capes then?
That's the other thing. I mean, it's easy in this sort of environment, this controversy, when things like this are raised, that it becomes a Pākehā Māori thing. This is not a Pākehā Māori thing, actually. The awareness that we want to raise is for everybody, including Māori. Māori are making these as well.
So New Zealand Golf has got back to us today, and I just want to read what they have said to you. They say that we certainly don't wish to cause any offence, but rather only to respect and honour our unique and special New Zealand culture. We will review these aspects of the presentation ceremony ahead of next year's tournament. What would you like them to do?
Oh, I think that's a great win. I think that's a great step forward. And any other organisation thinking or considering going down this track, if one person out there just says, wait, do we know it's a korowai? Do we really know it's a korowai? Then that's great. Then, that's a good outcome. Rather than judging a ugly satin back faux fur, go to the museum, have a look at some stunning korowai, and just imagine how much work's gone into it.
Do you think, Ata, that Michael Hill can help encourage New Zealand Golf to do something more about this?
I dare say he will. I mean, here's a man that works in Tonga himself. Jewelry is Tonga. He's got an inherent appreciation of Tonga, including Māori Tonga. And I felt very comfortable and confident that he would be a good advocate for quality. He is already.
So do you think his toes turned up a little bit when he saw that as well?
I don't think he was impressed, put it that way.
And that is Ata Te Kanawa there. Just as World Rugby is copping flack for its proposal to sideline Pacific teams in a new annual global tournament, Great Britain Rugby League has announced its 2019 tour will include a stopover in Papua New Guinea. The broader Oceania Cup will also feature Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, Australia and New Zealand, with a triple header scheduled for Eden Park on November the 2nd. It's the first tour of the combined British teams in over 10 years, and there's been a lot of talk already on the increased respect that Pacific teams have commanded. Our reporter Alex Perrottet has more.
Mate Ma'a made their presence felt in New Zealand last year following their upset over the Kiwis in Hamilton at the 2017 World Cup. Carried by pride in their nation and the sheer numbers of supporters, it was a coming of age, especially after high-profile NRL player Jason Taumalolo defected from New Zealand to play for his second-tier country of origin, prompting several other stars to follow suit. But that doesn't mean it's been easy sailing since. The Tongan coach Christian Wolff says every year is a challenge, from sponsorship to payment and to securing more games against Tier 1 nations. Warriors prop Leivahapulu plays for Tonga and says it's always been hard to get a number of international games strung together. And the Oceania Cup is exactly what the game needs.
We just had to be patient and, had to bide our time. And, the boys got the opportunity last year with, the game against Australia and, pulled in, quite a few people. And, for it to come around this year to get more games, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing.
The CEO of New Zealand Rugby League, Greg Peters, says a settled international calendar has been a long time coming and he's happy with the news.
Particularly in our game in New Zealand, a high proportion of Pacific Islanders that play in our game. This gives them an opportunity to showcase and play for their countries as well in their second home, which is New Zealand.
The Cup will be split into two halves, with games in June as well as late October and November to avoid clashing with the business end of the NRL season. And there will be two pools, New Zealand, Australia and Tonga in Pool A, and Samoa, Fiji and Papua New Guinea in Pool B. The Samoan-born Warriors captain and last year's Dally M medal winner Roger Tuivasa-Sheck says the announcement is an answer to calls for more international rugby league games in the region.
There's a lot of island boys in my team, and I just want to see them and playing in that stage, and that's what I'm excited for, seeing the Fiji, Papua New Guinea and all the island teams playing a stage like this, Eden Park, and having the crowd packed out.
He says he's looking forward to reliving the electric atmosphere of the Tongan game and just quietly looking forward to some sweet revenge.
It was an awesome experience being in the Tonga versus Kiwis game, and the crowd there was amazing, and I just can't wait to get back into it. For me personally, it was tough to take that loss after that game. On the other side, I was happy for the Tongan people and their players.
Greg Peters says the scenes last year at the Tongan game with red flags, painted faces and even painted vehicles will hopefully be repeated, but New Zealand still needs to learn from the passion of the Pacific fans.
In Papua New Guinea, you see it if you've ever been lucky enough, that I haven't yet, but if you get up to Papua New Guinea, they tell me it's madly passionate, sold out grounds, fantastic scenes, and that's kind of what we want in our game.
Leivahapulu says he's recently returned to Tonga and the next frontier is to hold a game there, but it's not quite ready yet.
At the state it is at now, I don't think it's a playable field to go and play it, but just to go over there and just to see the people and just to see how much passion, man. But they even got some houses that are painted red over there, so just to go over there will be really cool to go.
Greg Peters says he'd be happy with 48,000 people at Eden Park for the November 2 triple header. He says tickets will be on sale in the near future and there will be a waiting list, but he couldn't yet give a likely ticket cost. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And time for some of your feedback on the story we did on allegations of wage theft. This from Colin. Colin says, our report on exploitation of migrant workers is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a national disgrace, he says, and totally contrary to the notion of a fair go. What about naming and shaming the people behind the policies that have granted citizenship to dodgy, greedy, a word I probably can't repeat on the air, who are destroying our reputation as a decent country? Thanks, Colin. On the subject of whether flight attendants should be made to wear makeup and cabin crew, if female staff are required to wear makeup at work, then male staff should also be required to wear it. Same for high heels and tight skirts.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with tēnei. A 75-year-old man has been charged with murdering a 70-year-old woman at a Kapiti Coast retirement village. The woman died in MetLife Care's Coastal Villas complex at Raumati Beach. Detective Senior Sergeant Christian Barnard says the accused man will appear in the Porirua District Court tomorrow morning. The police are not seeking anyone else in relation to the death. Residents can expect to see a continued police presence in Westgate Drive until Friday during the scene examination. Workers at a liquor store franchise say they have been paid well below the minimum wage for up to 4 years. The Migrant Workers Association says at least 3 workers at Bottle O franchises operated by Ravinda Aurora in Auckland and the South Island have been substantially underpaid. Anu Kaloti from the association told Checkpoint the employees she's working with were scared to speak out.
It's because their visas are attached to this employer, so that is the threat that is used against them, that if you do not pay up, or if you do not do the extra hours, or if you do not work without any rest breaks or meal breaks, we will inform immigration and get your visa cancelled, and next thing you know, you'll be deported.
The Labour Inspectorate has confirmed it's investigating Ravinda Aurora's Himalaya companies. Mr Aurora has not responded to requests for comment. More than $500,000 will be paid to thousands of people charged unfair fees by 2 finance companies. The Commerce Commission says the companies breached consumer credit law. Ben Strang reports.
The motor vehicle lender Auto Finance Direct has agreed to return $460,000 to more than 5,000 people who were charged unreasonable fees. And Pacific Loans has agreed to refund $130,000 to 82 people charged interest and fees it had no right to charge for. A Commerce Commission spokesperson, Anna Rawlings, says it has been monitoring credit fees to ensure they cover costs that are closely related to the particular loan transaction. In 2016, the Supreme Court ruled that companies shouldn't be using fees to recover general business costs or to generate profit because that was what interest was for. This is Ben Strang.
The lawyer for a prominent businessman accused of groping 2 men says the complainants were trying to use him for his money. On the opening day of the man's trial in the Auckland District Court today, the Crown told the jury the defendant abused his power to indecently assault the 2 men. But defence lawyer David Jones said it was the complainant who took advantage of his client, not the other way round. This morning, Judge Russell Collins refused the defendant's application for name suppression, but it continues for now as the defence plans to appeal against that ruling. A second cabinet minister has resigned in Canada over a growing corruption scandal. Jane Philpott, who heads the Treasury Board, says she's lost confidence in the government's handling of an inquiry into the engineering and construction firm SNC Lavalin. The BBC's Lee Carter has more from Toronto.
The loss of Jane Philpott, a high-profile minister, will be a serious blow to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In her resignation letter, Ms Philpott said that she has serious concerns over allegations that government politicians and officials put pressure on a former Attorney General to intervene in a criminal court case involving the giant Canadian construction company SNC Lavalin. Mr Trudeau has denied any wrongdoing, but the growing scandal has been damaging his government's reputation in an election year.
Lee Carter reporting. The Auditor General's Office has blasted the Westland District Council for spending $1.3 million on a new stop bank. The office has just released its report on the council's decision to approve work to protect the Franz Josef wastewater treatment plant from flooding. It says the decision was made by the mayor and a councillor, and the councillor then chose a contractor. No council staff were involved in the planning of the work, nor was engineering advice sought. The Mayor of Westland, Bruce Smith, says the council was dealing with an emergency when it decided to authorise the stop bank and couldn't wait for engineering reports. He says that for years it's been following the proper process with little progress.
It's great to do reports, it's great to follow process, but there's a point that you get to, which is where we got to, where the next flood was going to take our ponds away. It was going to threaten the Scenic Circle site again, the kids' care, the kindy, the Friends School, the top 10 motor camps right there, and we weren't going to be part of seeing that happen again.
Westland's Mayor Bruce Smith. The road to Cape Kidnappers, where 2 tourists were seriously injured by a massive slip last month, is a step closer towards being reopened. The Hastings District Council today voted in favour of reopening the stretch of beach where the accident happened. Once staff have implemented safety measures, but before a full hazard assessment has been completed. So far, a hazard report has only been done for one section of the beach. The Mayor, Sandra Hazelhurst, says the council has no time frame for reopening the beach, but it will have to be comfortable measures. It will have to be comfortable measures taken to keep the public safe. She says a hazard report for the entire stretch of beach will be completed once access can be safely restored. It's coming up to 6 minutes past 6. New Zealand Rugby League says it's not taking the Kiwis game against Tonga in June to a bigger venue than Mount Smart Stadium because it hopes to recreate the scenes of last year's Tonga-Australia test there. That game was turned into a sea of red by passionate Tongan fans. Eden Park, with its much larger capacity, could have been considered an option for the June match, but New Zealand Rugby League Chief Executive Greg Peters says it was decided to stick with Mount Smart. Peters. We'll come back to that audio at another bulletin. The former Highlighters loose forward Nasi Manu is confident he can overcome testicular cancer and play for Tonga in this year's Rugby World Cup. A Super Rugby winner with the Highlanders 4 years ago, Manu is now with an Italian club and has undergone surgery and chemotherapy. He told Rugby World magazine he's back training and raring to play again, with the next step a full check-up in June. And Black Caps captain Kane Williamson is officially New Zealand's greatest cricketer of all time. He has reached 915 ICC rating points, surpassing Sir Richard Hadley's 909, and is closing in on the top spot held by India's Virat Kohli. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, someone has a song crush on the latest from the Chemical Brothers. Melody Thomas is back with another bang. There's a window on the world of tinnitus, the ghost sounds that wreck some people's hearing, and our mathematician Dylan Mayhew has details of the largest prime number so far discovered. But with over 25 million digits, don't expect him to recite it. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, fine apart from areas of cloud, air or possible fog morning and night. Waitomo to Wellington, including central high country, mainly fine but cloudy areas, especially morning and evening, and isolated light showers tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon. Bulla and Westland, mostly cloudy with patchy light rain or drizzle. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. However, a few showers about Stewart Island today and isolated showers tomorrow. Fiordland, rain. Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods. It's 8:30 past 6 and you're with RNZ National.
And you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A 75-year-old man has been charged with murder after the death of a woman at a retirement village north of Wellington. Our reporter Jonathan Mitchell is at Raumati Beach on the Kapiti coast and he joins us now via live view. Hi Jonathan, what can you tell us?
Evening, Lisa. Well, yeah, we've been at the scene about an hour and a half and have seen police come and go. Next door, we've seen a blue tent where police investigators have been at the scene all day at the back of a property. We saw that van leave roughly about half an hour ago. Late this afternoon, we heard that a homicide investigation has been launched. But in the last 15-20 minutes, we've heard that a 75-year-old man, as you say, has been charged with murder, and he'll appear in the Porirua District Court tomorrow. Now, the 70-year-old woman was discovered this morning at the property. There's cordons up around it, so we can't get any closer than probably 20 or 30 metres. We haven't been able to get in touch with MetLife Care. This is where the property is on Romati Beach. But we understand that police will be here for much of the week investigating, and they're likely to have a presence until at least Friday.
Thanks, Jonathan. That is Jonathan Mitchell, who is outside the scene there at a rest home at Romati Beach on Kapiti Coast there, where a man has been charged with murder after the death of a woman at the retirement home. Hundreds of family and friends of Denver Chance have taken to the streets of Auckland and further to search for the missing 43-year-old businessman. Mr Chance was last seen heading down Auckland's southern motorway near Drury. The police say they have growing concerns something might have happened to him. Brooke Jenner reports.
It has been 9 days since Denver Chance left his North Shore home and disappeared without a trace. His loved ones are out in force looking for him.
In the hundreds at least. The amount of people that shared it across my Facebook friends, their family friends, and all the hot rod clubs and car clubs that we share it on. We've even had friends in Christchurch sharing it, so it's definitely spread across, but yeah, still unfortunately we haven't found anything.
Family member and friend Herbert Fowle says people are following routes Mr Chance might have taken. He put up his drone in South Auckland, one of 5 searching the skies.
I've got a drone, so I got asked by his cousin directly if I could come around these areas, just get aerial footage, see if there's anything gone off the road or just any sort of signs that we could find at all.
They've extended their range to Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato, Hunua Ranges and north of Auckland. But as for a formal investigation by the police...
It's up in the air. Police aren't giving us much information. The information that they are giving us have been quite delayed. So it's mainly just everyone getting out personally on foot and trying to see what we can find.
The police say his red 2008 Nissan Skyline was last seen on the southern motorway, heading south past the Drury exit just after 4 o'clock on Sunday, February the 24th. Mr Chance, who was wearing shorts and a singlet, is described as being of solid build with dark brown hair and a tattoo on his shoulder and down his left arm. His mother, Paula McGregor, says she hasn't lost hope of finding her son and she's praying for him.
He was going to come and visit me, and he said, "Shall we go and do a movie, Mum?"
Gary Hoff has been friends with Denver Chance for 17 years and says his disappearance is completely out of character.
He left without anything as well, like he didn't take his toothbrush or laptop or anything like that, he's very connected to his businesses through his computer and whatnot, so he's just disappeared off the face of the earth, and I don't think it's through any of his own doing.
Mr Hoff says his friend is a motivated, driven person and has run many different businesses over the years.
Right into his gym, very fit. He's always had his own businesses. Ever since we first met, he's been doing various different businesses and just super driven to keep that up for many years, and he's had ups and downs with that, but lately he's been doing well with that stuff, which, I don't know, just makes it even worse. I guess he's just reached a point that he's, I think, really happy with and been travelling quite a lot. And, now that he's missing like this, it's obviously not ideal.
The police believe the key to finding Mr Chance will be tracking down his car. While they are still treating this as a missing persons case, they have growing concerns something might have happened to him. Ko Brooke Jenner Tine.
Venezuela's self-declared interim leader, Juan Guaido, has risked immediate arrest and has arrived back in the capital, Caracas, to a rapturous welcome from thousands of supporters. Mr Guaido, who is now recognised by more than 50 countries, left Venezuela 10 days ago in a bid to try and bring in humanitarian aid. He's continuing to put pressure on President Nicolas Maduro to stand down. From the capital, Caracas, the BBC's Will Grant reports.
Juan Guaido could have been arrested the moment he stepped off the flight. Instead, he breezed back onto Venezuelan soil and into the arms of his supporters. For those who see him as their president, his return is an important step on the road to removing Nicolas Maduro from power. And if the goal was to maintain their momentum, this is what greeted Mr. Guaido's return. At the height of Carnival, his appearance in Caracas has lifted the spirits of his faithful.
They threatened all of us, including me, with jail, death. But we're not going to give up fighting. We are stronger and more united than ever.
The arrival of Guaido to this country represents the awakening of hope among the Venezuelan people. We've been waiting for this call.
This is exactly the reaction that Mr. Guaido's supporters wanted to see from him. Not just returning to Venezuela, but through the front door and thumbing his nose at Mr. Maduro and the travel ban on his way in.
President Maduro, meanwhile, spent the day insisting all was well, admiring the country's tourism infrastructure over the extended holiday. He says Juan Guaido has acted illegally and is trying to stage a coup. Yet he knows arresting him would bring an instant reaction, both on the streets of Venezuela and from abroad. The Trump administration has made no bones about its support for Mr. Guaido, and National Security Advisor John Bolton warned President Maduro of swift retribution should anything happen to him. So the lines of the Venezuelan conflict are drawn. Now the question most Venezuelans are asking is if Mr. Maduro will accept his opponent's return or arrest him in the coming days.
Will Grant reporting there from the Venezuelan capital of Caracas. A subcontractor is out of pocket and short one crane after being caught up in the collapse of construction company Arrow International. The firm, which employs 250 people, went into voluntary administration last week. Smith Crane and Construction can't access its crane and it doesn't know when it will be released, even though it's booked for other jobs. Jordan Bond reports.
There are 90 cranes in Auckland, more than any city in the United States and more than New York and Los Angeles combined. But even though there's huge demand, Tim Smith's crane is towering above Auckland, completely still and unused since last week. It's locked up on a site which was being run by Arrow International, now in voluntary administration. Mr. Smith says a court order prevents him from removing it, while administrators work out what to do. He says other subcontractors are being penalised for the failures of precarious building companies.
They're just falling over like bloody flies. It's all the smaller guys that are getting hurt. I'm okay, and I've probably got a bit of influence because they can't do the job without my crane, but it's the small guys that get hurt.
Tim Smith knows of other subcontractors who can't get their tools or their materials because they're locked up on site. He says the crane costs $5,000 a week to hire, and there are other jobs booked. He blames the power imbalance between subcontractors and main contractors.
It's a heads I win, tails you lose situation. These main contractors go and price these jobs on very small margins. If it goes well and they make a profit, the profit goes off into some other company, and if it goes bad and it starts losing money and the company gets in financial strife, they just cut it and burn, and the subcontractors end up taking the losses.
The Specialist Trade Contractors Federation says holding materials on site is a disappointing but normal process when a company goes into administration. The Deputy Chairman, Greg Wallace, says it leaves subbies out of pocket and often without their tools when they've still got their bills to pay and jobs to do.
And this is our issue. We don't have any protection for the sub-trades, and all the risk is pushed down to the crane operator, the plumber, the electrician, painters, etc. And so the risk is just getting far too high for these projects.
In a statement, Administrator Andrew Bethel of BDO says when a company goes into voluntary administration, a moratorium is created, which gives the administrators time to work through the options for the building site and the company involved. He says Smith Cranes does not have a right to collect its crane, and BDO sought a court injunction to ensure it wouldn't be removed. Tim Smith says construction companies are not the enemy of subcontractors.
So, we all need each other. We just want an environment where we do our job and we get paid for it. But it's happening more regularly that we all do our jobs, put our money into these developments as subcontractors, and then all of a sudden the company's off into receivership and no one gets any money.
Mr Smith wants more protection for subcontractors to ensure they don't get caught out. For Checkpoint, I'm Jordan Bond.
The building and construction industry says it's concerned that changes to how apprenticeships are run could leave the industry in turmoil. It held a summit in Auckland today to discuss the future of work-based industry training and proposed changes put forward by the government. Jessie Chang reports.
It's being described as a radical change. 16 polytechnics across the country combined into a single national institute and having one provider to organise apprentices into work-based industry training. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins says the move would solve the sector's financial problems and make better use of taxpayer dollars. But industry training organisations and trade employers are concerned.
It's the relationship at the sector level with the industries and the trades that sets up the system they want, the number of block courses, the amount of on-job or off-job training. So that relationship seems to be the nugget that holds this all together and makes it successful. And if we lose that, we're likely to be in quite big trouble.
That's Warwick Quinn, the Chief Executive of the Building and Construction Industry Training Organisation. He says it's crucial that the change is handled smoothly so that employers stay engaged and take on apprentices. Mr Quinn says up to 10,000 more apprentices are needed over the next 5 years to meet demand, and the government has previously said the sector is 30,000 workers short. The Chief Executive of Master Painters, Brian Miller, says he supports radical change if it's done in the right way.
The government seem to be taking a sword to part of the sector that's working well to fix another part of the sector that they believe needs urgent attention.
Mr Miller says the majority of those at the meeting today want industry to keep control of what qualifications and training is needed. Martin Golden started his own building business more than 20 years ago. He employs 18 people and says all of them, except for 2, went through an apprenticeship program run by industry organisations. Mr Golden says how people are trained is vital.
If changes are well considered and introduced, perhaps without the blessing of the employers, that the brakes get put on the industry. We're not at a time where we can have a huge change and turmoil in our industry.
Chris Hipkins has previously said the new National Polytechnic could be set up as early as 2020, but the changes it would bring to vocational training would be introduced much more slowly. He says the sector is currently too fragmented and its proposal will make taking on apprentices more seamless for employers. Mr Hipkins says apprentices will be well supported through any potential changes. Consultation on the government's proposals closed late this month. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
The Prime Minister has ruled out lowering the MMP threshold in time for next year's election under pressure from the opposition. The National Party this morning challenged Ms Ardern to take the option off the table following the Greens' public push to reduce the limit from 5% to 4%. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch has the story.
So, let's have a look at the mixed member proportional system.
Since New Zealand's first MMP election in 1996, the threshold for a party to make it into Parliament has stayed the same.
To get any seats in Parliament, a party must reach at least 5% of the party vote, or win an electorate seat.
Now Labour and the Greens want change. They think the threshold should sit at 4%, as the Electoral Commission recommended in 2012. The opposition's unimpressed.
Rorting the system for Labour's electoral advantage was wrong, and to do it here to save a three-party coalition's bacon, that would also be wrong.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges this morning challenged the Prime Minister to rule out any change affecting the 2020 election. By this afternoon,
2020, no.
Jacinda Ardern quickly moving to shut down talk of any imminent change.
Anything that we may do in this space, no, would not happen for the 2020 election. Obviously, this is about the future makeup of parliaments, and having it determined in that way I don't think would be appropriate.
The only question then is, would the government change the law to kick in after 2020, or would they first put it to the people? The Greens co-leader James Shaw prefers the former.
The Electoral Commission themselves
actually said that these changes were fairly minor. There were tens of thousands of submissions and the public had a say at the time. So they actually recommended that it not go to a referendum. But ultimately, if people feel that it needs to go to referendum, in order to have that legitimacy, then I'd be okay with that too.
The New Zealand First Leader, Winston Peters, says his party supports the threshold remaining at 5%, but he's happy to follow the public's lead.
It's a constitutional matter, and that should be decided by the New Zealand people, not by temporarily empowered politicians.
The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says he's sympathetic to a public vote next year, alongside questions about cannabis and possibly euthanasia.
The voters having a say takes away any allegation that this is politicians acting in their self-interest.
The National Party's also open to a referendum. Cabinet ministers are to make a decision in the next few weeks.
And that's MMP.
Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
Less than 2 weeks after New Zealand's Poverty Bay adopted its new dual name of Turanganui Kiwa, the Cook Islands has commissioned a committee to also find an Indigenous name. The 15 islands that make up the country have both Cook Islands Māori as well as Pākehā names, such as Rarotonga, Atutaki and Palmerston. The move has reignited a long-standing call for a public vote on a name change after a failed referendum in the mid-1990s. Mackenzie Smith reports.
In a country named after British explorer James Cook, there has long been a simmering call for a change of name. But after decades of the status quo, efforts to realign the country with its indigenous language, Cook Islands Māori, are gaining traction again. A committee convened in January by a Cook Islands Paramount Chief, Pāmari Ariki, is deliberating on a name which could then go to a binding referendum. Deputy Prime Minister Mark Brown says it has a long way to go, but he's supportive of the cause.
I'm quite happy to look at a traditional name for our country, which more reflects, the true Polynesian nature of our island nation.
The committee, which is already looking at nearly 60 possible new names from public submissions, hopes to whittle the list down to one by April. Its chair, Danny Mataroa, says once a name has been found, the government will take the reins. He says any new name must have history and meaning for the Cook Islands.
It also must be easy to say, and it also has to have a taste of our Christian faith and have a big say on our Maori heritage. And it must be able to instill a sense of pride in the heart of our people and have the ability to unite our people.
Previous name change efforts in the Cook Islands have fell short. In the mid-1990s, a majority of Cook Islanders voted to keep the country's name in a national referendum. But Mr Mataroa says that vote failed because it was based on deliberations centred on representations on the main island of Rarotonga. This time around, he says traditional leaders from all 12 of the country's inhabited islands are involved in the committee.
This is the first time this has ever happened in the Cook Islands, ever. I don't think they wrote the right words in our constitution on how to change our name. So this is the first time we've actually gone this far.
Mr Mataroa says he would prefer to avoid a referendum if possible because of the costs involved. But the Deputy Prime Minister, Mark Brown, says the government may have to put it to the people.
There's quite a bit of legality that's going to be involved. But as I said to them, I think the first steps is to actually find out what the public appetite is for a change of name.
The Leader of the Opposition, Tina Brown, says people in the Cook Islands are split on the issue.
Some people feel that we've been known as the Cook Islands for so long that we should stick with it, and others seem to think that no, we should look for an Indigenous name for the Cook Islands. Whether or not it's going to command the support of the majority, it's very hard to tell.
Mr Mataroa says part of the committee's job is to market the idea to the public, but this will hinge on getting the name right. For now, he says public submissions continue to flood in. For Checkpoint, Cor Mackenzie Smith, TNA.
And time for a bit of feedback now on Mark Taylor. This is the New Zealander who went to Syria and fought for IS. This person says all IS fighters should be tried according to Sharia law. As the charges will usually involve deadly crimes against Muslims, the penalty will almost likely be death. On the subject of school students skipping out of school to protest against climate change, we had this text. Students are so concerned about climate change, they're going to march on Saturday. Yeah, right. But this one from Patsy, this is such an important issue that we are leaving for our young people to deal with. So, of course, we should be supporting young people to stand up. It is their future. Shame on us older generations who are not. Well done, and a big thank you to the young people brave enough to take a stand. Thanks, Patsy, for your feedback. Also on the subject of makeup, this is the story about whether cabin crew or some professions should, well, have mandatory makeup. This one says, you choose to work for a private company, you agree to the dress code as per your employment arrangement. Personal choice is to leave the job or not take it in the first place. End of, really, they say. Virgin Atlantic is getting rid of mandatory makeup. Air New Zealand has told us that it is reviewing its grooming policy as part of its uniform change, and they'll update us as to whether it still remains compulsory. They do ask female cabin crew and pilots to wear natural makeup, they say. This one says, this texter is saying, natural beauty look for airline staff if it is the choice for the ladies. But let's end with my favourite of the night from Helen. Helen says the cabin crew on some of the low-cost airlines in Europe like EasyJet and Ryanair should be allowed to wear crime scene overalls given the state of some of their travellers. You've made my night, Helen. Thank you so much for your feedback. That's it for Checkpoint this evening. Appreciate you joining us on the radio. Don't forget you can check back online to see some of our visual stories, and we'll keep you updated online with the news through the evening. But for tonight, that's us. We'll be back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A 75-year-old man has been charged with murdering a woman at a retirement village in Raumati Beach, north of Wellington. Immigrants working at some bottle-o liquor stores say they've been substantially underpaid but were scared to speak out because of their visas. More than $500,000 will be paid to thousands charged unfair fees by two finance companies. And the Auditor-General has blasted the Westland District Council for spending $1.3 million on a stop bank, a decision made only by the Mayor and a councillor. Our next news will be at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
New Zealanders suspected of association with terrorist groups should expect to be investigated.
Including the latest national and international news from the RNZ News team.
We've got 14 confirmed dead at this time. I expect that number to go higher.
And always live when and where we need to be.
I'm looking at it from both sides because,